Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the Larouche Organization with your daily video update for May 27th, 2025. I hope many of you had an opportunity to participate in the conference, the Larouche Organization Memorial Day Weekend Conference this last weekend. It was an extraordinary event, quite extraordinary. And I'm going to review a little bit of it because I want you to take advantage of the fact that we have a link to watch the entire conference if you wish. But the important thing is that we're at a moment of transition in world history, the end of an era, the end of an imperial era of colonial exploitation, the emergence of a sovereign system of nations, whether you want to call it multipolar, multinodal. We're seeing an end to the old unipolar order, or the order which has two blocks competing. And we have an opportunity now to replace that with a system of sovereign nation states working in cooperation for the benefit of the other. And that was the underlying topic of the conference. And what held it together was the prescience over many, many years of Lyndon Larouche in developing his conceptions of physical economy and the American system. And this came through in discussions of people from many different countries, top officials, former diplomats, a former president. It was a profound event. Now, I've been going to Larouche conferences for over 50 years. My first one was 1972, when I was a young anti-war graduate student trying to find a pathway to do something useful with my future. And watching Larouche and listening to Larouche and being challenged and inspired by him, because what he said is, if you want a future, you have to make it. You can't rely on an existing group of political establishment figures, especially those who are corrupt. And then, of course, we had the Vietnam War, we had the Nixon administration, we had Watergate, we had Jimmy Carter and the Trilateral Commission. These last 5 decades have been a period of great danger, in part dominated in the first part by the Cold War. And think about the early 70s coming just after the Cuban Missile Crisis, where we could have had a nuclear confrontation that would have destroyed civilization. So Larouche challenged us and said, go out and create a future, but to do it, you have to know something. The most important thing to know is that human beings are creative, and human beings have the capacity to change the history of humanity. And the question is, do you have a willingness to challenge your own assumptions, challenge your own sense of identity, and locate an identity in the future, in the eternal? And this was a profound concept for young people. This came up again in the period around the 2000 election, when Larouche intervened, and I was involved with several others in creating a second Larouche youth movement. And now today, 25 years after that, we're seeing the emergence of a third Larouche youth movement. And panel 5 at the conference was led by younger people in a discussion of the profound ideas of science and the investigation of what it means to be human. And you see young people, what Larouche always said is that the advantage of having a youth movement is you can inspire the older, tired generation, which has given up, which in a sense has been corrupted, and accepts the axioms of the establishment. Now, to me, one of the most interesting panels was the 4th panel on the Larouche Legacy, where you'll see a number of clips of Larouche over the years addressing these questions. And what always remained the same was a commitment on his part to optimism based on knowing that he can challenge younger people to think And if they become self-critical, they'll be capable of mastering some of the most profound ideas in history, which is what's necessary if you're going to change history. So I would recommend, especially panel 1, where you had an all-star lineup, you might say. Panel 4, the Larouche Legacy, and panel 5, the youth panel. Now there's also, the second panel was on culture, which is really quite profound and moving. The third panel had a keynote by me on the whole question of the Oasis Plan, but a number of other contributors who discussed why it is you need an economic solution, not a, quote, political solution, whether you're talking about the Middle East or the Russia-Ukraine crisis, the trade crisis. All of these things go back to the fact that the financial system is dominated by fakery, by financialization, by the ability to print money, to roll over debt, to essentially keep increasing the debt on the backs of the future without solving the problem. And this is one of the things Larouche addressed for many, many years and still has to be addressed today. So the important question here is, will there be a future? Will we get through this transition period of the end of an imperial era? And can we make it to the other side peacefully? There are a lot of indications that we can. The emergence of the BRICS, the global south, the willingness of President Trump to set aside the demands of the deep state for war and look for solutions. I don't think on the economy he has the solutions. I think he's, in some cases, trends in the right direction. But what's necessary is a full understanding of such Larouchian principles as potential relative population density, the importance of increasing the energy flux density to increase the productivity of the workforce, and most importantly, to fight against the imperial system, which is centered in the City of London. These are all things that are the hallmarks of Lyndon LaRouche's efforts to educate a cadre of young people over and over and over to provide a leadership for a new paradigm. And we're now, I think, if you look over the ledge here, what you'll see is the new paradigm coming into shape. But if we don't bring it in, we'll go over the edge into chaos. And that was the underlying sense of urgency that defined the participation in the conference. So there are solutions. And the solution really is the need for a whole new generation of leadership. Where is it going to come from? From Harvard? From the City of London? From the billionaire class? No, it's going to come from the people. It's going to come from people who take seriously their responsibility to ensure a future which is not encumbered by the bad decisions of the existing narratives of geopolitics, identity politics, and so on. So take the time over the next days, watch these presentations, think about them, discuss them. If you have questions, contact us. You can always find through the Schiller Institute an ability to reach us. And I often give my personal email address. If you have a question for me, send it to me at harleysch@gmail.com. But don't just sit there assuming that nothing can be done. We see genocide going on in Palestine. We see what it looks like is going to be an endless war if the Europeans prevail on having the Ukraine continue to be used as a battering ram against Russia. The whole situation in Africa, where you have many militias, you have terrorists, but you also have millions of young people who are looking for a future. So we have a responsibility in the West to clean up our act, to get rid of the corruption, and to provide new ideas of leadership based on physical economic progress coming from scientific progress and the technologies that result from new advances in science. That's an exciting world waiting to be discovered. Who's going to discover it? Well, the older generation can provide some leads and some examples, but it's going to come from youth. And that's the way it always has in history. And so that's where we have a responsibility today. That's why I encourage you. Use the link in the description section to log on, watch some of these panels, and take to heart this question. And by the way, if you're not young physically, if you're not a teenager or early 20s, doesn't matter. Be young up here. Be part of the solution.